After I retired, I moved to Austin to be closer to my daughter Carol. She had just bought a new condo, well, new to her. I gave her the down payment, though she doesn't mention that part often. The place had high windows and soft gray walls, and she liked to call it modern minimalist. I never said it out loud, but it always felt cold. I took the guest room, which we later began calling the grandma suite. I babysat her son most days while she was at work. I also paid for the groceries, cooked dinner most nights, and covered the electric bill once when she forgot. She'd smile and say, "You're making my life so much easier." And I believed that was a good thing. One morning we were sitting in the kitchen. She was scrolling on her phone, coffee growing cold beside her. I was folding laundry. My laundry, her son's socks. She looked up casually and said, "You know, maybe you should think about a senior living place someday. Just planning ahead." She smiled like it was nothing. I folded another shirt, kept my face still. But something cold moved through my chest. Not hurt, not even surprise. Just a quiet understanding. I was no longer part of her plans. Just a variable she hoped to manage. It was subtle at first. "Thank you, Mister," a sigh there. Carol would say she was running late, and ask me to watch the baby a little longer. That little longer became all day. Once, she didn't come home until 10. No message. No apology. Her husband, Mark, stopped making small talk altogether. He would breeze past me in the mornings, coffee in hand, earbuds in. If he ever acknowledged me, it was with a polite nod, like I was a neighbor they didn't want to offend. Then one afternoon I overheard him on the phone. I was in the hallway, holding a basket of towels, when his voice drifted in from the kitchen. "She's fine. I mean, she pays for stuff. Not in the way." I didn't move. Just stood there with the towels pressed against my chest, listening. Not in the way. That stayed with me longer than I expected. Later that week, Carol asked if I'd mind changing my mailing address to theirs. "It'll just be easier," she said, spooning yogurt into a bowl for her son. "Saves you the trip to the post office." I said yes, of course. Felt like a small thing. But that night, I woke with a heaviness in my chest. A kind of silent weight I couldn't place. I lay there in the dark, the ceiling fan spinning slow circles overhead, and thought about the word easy, how it always seems to mean easier for someone else. They had stopped asking how I was. The only questions were logistical. Can you pick up formula? Can you take him to the doctor? Can you watch him through the weekend? Each one wrapped in the same sugary tone, each one delivered as if it were already decided. Gratitude evaporated. I began to notice that my name was no longer mentioned in conversations with friends who came over. Mark introduced me as Carol's mom, not Olivia, as if I were just another fixture in the house like the standing lamp or the guest bath. Carol started using words like dependent when talking about me on the phone, assuming I couldn't hear her through the vent. I heard her once late at night. "She just needs structure." Honestly, I think she likes being needed. It gives her something to do. Something to do. That was what I had become. Gap filler. A quiet, aging woman with a credit card and a casserole dish. I stopped baking. Not out of protest, just fatigue. The kind of fatigue that settles in your bones when your presence is tolerated, not welcomed. Carol didn't notice. She bought store-bought cookies and told her friends I'd made them. I didn't correct her. Not because I was afraid, but because it didn't matter anymore. Then came the Saturday she told me they had plans and needed the house. "Just for the night," she said. "You don't mind, do you?" I packed an overnight bag and stayed in a cheap hotel on the edge of town. When I returned the next morning, the place smelled like wine and candles. A new photo had been added to the fridge. Just Carol, Mark, and the baby. I wasn't in it. Later that week, she mentioned a birthday party they were planning. "You don't need to worry about anything," she said. "We've got it covered." I offered to make her favorite pie, the same one I'd baked every year since she was 12. "Oh, that's sweet," she said, but didn't say yes. Still, I baked it. Just in case. The party was on a Sunday afternoon. The kind of bright, indifferent heat that makes everything feel exposed. Carol had chosen pale green napkins and white lilies, placed in glass jars along the windowsills. I recognized the jars from the preserves I used to make. Plum and fig, always in the fall. I don't think she remembered that. I arrived early as asked. She handed me a list. Napkins to fold, plates to set, ice to check. Mark was in the living room with his Bluetooth speaker, curating the playlist. Their son was with a sitter, oddly enough. I offered to keep him home for the day, but Carol said it would be too much noise. I nodded and wiped down the countertops. By noon, the guests began arriving. Women with long earrings and polished sandals, men who spoke in confident, clipped tones. Everyone brought something. Flowers. An expensive-looking candle. I brought a pie. Apple cinnamon, my old recipe. Carol's favorite. Or it had been. I placed it gently on the side table, beside a stack of pristine dessert plates. No one noticed. I stayed near the hallway, near the door. Felt safer there. Less bright, less exposed. A few guests glanced at me, smiled politely. One woman asked if I was the nanny. I said no, just visiting. She nodded and turned away, already bored. I didn't correct her. The living room was crowded, laughter loud and pointed. Mark laughed too easily. Carol's laughter came delayed, as if mimicking the rhythm of the others. She wore a white linen dress I hadn't seen before. Her hair was pinned up. She looked beautiful, unfamiliar. I watched her from the hallway. Watched her tilt her glass. Watched her eyes move past me again and again. Once I caught her gaze. She looked surprised to see me there. Not guilty. Just surprised. As if she had already edited me out of the scene and forgotten to tell me. I walked into the kitchen to catch my breath. I adjusted the foil over the pie. Took a sip of water. Listened to the clock ticking on the stove. Then came the clink of glass. Mark's fork against a wine glass, calling the room to attention. Carol stood near the dining table, holding her drink. She cleared her throat. I just want to say, she began. This year has been transformative. Light laughter. Anticipation. She smiled. Not at anyone in particular. And I've learned something, she said. The best gift you can receive is when people understand when it's time to step out of your life. Laughter. More laughter. Toast. I stood in the threshold between the kitchen and the dining room, watching it unfold. Her voice was clear. Her tone was light. It was meant to sound like a joke. But I heard it differently. I heard the choice behind the words. A subtle declaration. A shift made official. She didn't look at me. No one did. I stood holding the edge of the counter, one hand still damp from rinsing glasses. My heart didn't race. My breath didn't catch. But something inside me went very, very still. I walked back into the kitchen, found a clean towel, dried my hands. Someone started a new song on the speaker. Guests drifted toward the patio. The mood lifted again like a breeze. I moved to the pie. Still untouched. I lifted it gently, walked it to the refrigerator, placed it on the bottom shelf, closed the door without a sound. No one noticed. In the hallway, a man was telling a story about his dog eating an engagement ring. Carol laughed in a way that made her earrings swing. She looked happy. Or she looked like someone playing happy. I left quietly. No goodbyes. I slipped my shoes on by the door, picked up my purse. The hallway was empty. The living room was loud. Outside, the sun had begun to slide behind the apartment complex. The sidewalk shimmered faintly. I walked the 2 blocks home without hurry. Keys in hand. No tears. Inside, the guest room smelled of fabric softener and dust. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my suitcase, still tucked under the frame, half unpacked since the day I moved in. I stood, crossed the room, opened the top drawer of the dresser. Inside was a small stack of envelopes, bank forms, doctor bills, a birthday card from a church friend. I pulled them out, leafed through them slowly. Then I opened the second drawer. There, beneath folded scarves, were the letters. Carol's notes from college, her Mother's Day cards, drawings from her son when he was 2. I sat on the floor with them, laid them out like a timeline. In one, she had drawn a heart and written, "You're my favorite person, even when you're grumpy." Another, "Thank you for always listening. I want to be like you when I'm older." I read each one, then folded them all together, slipped them into a manila envelope. I didn't seal it. I didn't cry. Later I went into the kitchen. The sink was clean, the counter bare. I opened the window above the sink and let in the night air. It smelled faintly of barbecue smoke from a neighbor's grill. I made a cup of tea, sat in the silence. The silence had changed. It used to feel full of waiting for the next task, the next favor, the next soft insult disguised as concern. Now it felt different, thinner, sharper. The kind of silence that marks a before and after. That night I didn't sleep much. I lay in bed listening to the refrigerator hum and the occasional car passing on the street. At some point I rose and began sorting through my documents. Bank statements, account passwords, the power of attorney Carol had asked me to sign when I first moved in. "Just in case," she had said. "You know, for emergencies." I had agreed. She brought the notary herself. Smiled the whole time. I found that folder now, pulled it free, and began to read. Not for the first time. But this time with new eyes. A few days after the party, I stood at the mailbox, holding a letter that didn't feel right in my hands. It was from the bank. The envelope was thin, plain, but something about it made my stomach turn. I opened it right there, beneath the late morning sun, the neighbor's dog barking half-heartedly across the street. "Confirmation of address change," it read. Name. Carol's condo. Not a request, confirmation. I hadn't asked for it. I hadn't even known it was happening. I walked back to the condo slowly, the letter clutched in my hand, each step measured. Inside, the house was quiet. Carol was at work. Mark 2. Their son at daycare. I moved through the rooms like a guest who had arrived unannounced. In my bedroom, the one they still sometimes called the guest room, I opened the small file box I kept under the bed. My documents were there, but a few had been disturbed. Corner bent. A medical bill opened and slipped back hastily. I hadn't touched it in weeks. A sour taste bloomed in my mouth. I took the bank letter, the disturbed documents, and sat at the kitchen table. The sunlight from the window fell across the wood in long, slow streaks. I laid everything out like puzzle pieces, waiting for the picture to form. Then I picked up the phone and called the bank. The woman who answered was kind but clipped. She asked for verification. Gave it. She asked about recent transactions. I said I wasn't sure. Hadn't looked closely in months. I had trusted Carol with online access, thinking it was easier that way. There was a pause as she checked the records. Then her voice changed. "Mrs. Adams, would you mind holding while I transfer you to the account manager?" Held. The silence buzzed in my ear. A man came on the line. "Mr. Reyes." He was careful, measured, but not cold. "Mrs. Adams, we've noticed some unusual activity on your account." "What kind of activity?" "Well," he said, "it appears that a series of withdrawals, smaller amounts but frequent, have been taking place over the last 10 months. Totals approximately $48,700. My throat closed. "Where? From where?" "All from your primary savings account." The online banking access was set up on a device registered to a Carol W. Adams. "My daughter." "Yes. The system shows that the change of address was processed from that same device." Closed my eyes. My hand gripped the edge of the table. "And the power of attorney?" "Yes. Yes, we have that on file. Signed last year." "She brought the notary herself," I said. "I didn't read it closely. She said it was for emergencies." Mr. Reyes didn't respond to that. "Can you tell me," I continued, "how the funds were used?" There was a pause. Some were listed as transfers to external accounts. A few were for home renovations, contractor fees, materials. "Her home," I said quietly. "Yes." I looked around the kitchen. The new backsplash. The pendant lights. The custom shelving in the hallway. I had commented on all of it. Carol had smiled and said, "We've been saving up." They hadn't been. I had. "Do I still have control of the account?" Yes. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "You're still the primary. If you wish to revoke access, we can do that immediately." I gave the instruction. Then I hung up the phone and sat very still. Nearly $50,000. Taken like it was nothing. Over time. Quietly. Like bleeding in your sleep. I pulled the pie from the fridge, cut a slice, and sat at the table with it. It was still good. Cold but good. Ate it slowly. The crust flaked beneath my fork. Later that day I took a cab across town. I didn't tell anyone I was going. Just walked into Tom Delaney's office, an old friend of my husband's, now a lawyer. He had once helped me settle an estate matter years ago, when my sister passed. Tom looked up from his desk surprised. "Olivia." I sat down. "I need help," I said. "And I don't want Carol to know." He closed the door. I laid everything out. The bank withdrawals. Their dress change. The documents disturbed. The power of attorney. Tom listened without interrupting. He took notes. He nodded. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "She's building a new life," I said. "One where I don't exist." "Not legally," he replied. "Not anymore." He helped me revoke the power of attorney. File a complaint with the bank. Reclaim my mail through the post office. Set up alerts for any account access attempts. Then I told him I wanted to test something. I left a fake itinerary on the kitchen counter. A note saying I was going to a spa for 3 days. Printed a brochure from the internet. Packed a small bag with old clothes. Left the house just before Carol got home. But I didn't go far. I stayed with a friend from church. She didn't ask questions. Just gave me tea and let me sleep in the spare room. The next morning the alerts began. An attempt to log into my account. Another. A call placed to the bank pretending to verify a bill. Tom had warned me. He said it would come quickly once the illusion of passivity was gone. They didn't know I was watching now. They thought I was gone. They thought they had won. I stayed another night with my friend. We made soup. Watched an old movie. I laughed once, startled by the sound of it. In the morning I walked around her neighborhood. The trees were blooming, small pink flowers catching the light. I hadn't noticed spring coming. Back at the condo, I let myself in quietly. Carol was at work. The kitchen was clean. My note still on the fridge. I took it down, folded it into a neat square, and placed it in my drawer. Then I changed the locks. I didn't go back to being quiet. I went back to being precise. Tom helped me draft the official notice revoking Carol's financial access. We filed it with the bank, the credit bureaus, and the postal service. I opened a new P.O. box. I changed every password. Not just to my accounts, email, utilities, even the grocery delivery app Carol used through my card. I locked every door she'd once held a key to. She didn't know yet. That was important. Because silence, real silence, is never passive. Strategic. I began to collect copies of every withdrawal. P addresses. I printed emails where she'd referenced our savings, and texts asking for just a little help to finish the bathroom. There were receipts for paint, tile, light fixtures. All shipped to this address. All charged to my account. I made a file. Then I left town again, on paper. A weekend getaway, I said aloud one afternoon while watering the plants. I said it loud enough for Carol's son, just home from daycare, to hear me. He parroted it later at dinner. "Nana's going to a spa," he shouted, grinning, face smeared with marinara. Carol smiled at him and nodded. "That'll be nice for her," she said. But I saw it, the flicker in her eyes. The calculation. I left the next morning with a suitcase packed full of towels and shoes with holes in the soles. Left the brochure on the kitchen counter again. A note. "Gone until Monday. Cell reception will be spotty." Then I drove around the corner, parked in the lot of an abandoned Blockbuster, and waited. The first alert came at 10:16 a.m., attempted login to my savings account from an unrecognized device. The second came 15 minutes later. Failed password attempt. Then a call placed to the bank's customer service line. Caller disconnected before completing verification. Then an email arrived. My email, not hers. Subject: request to add authorized user. I forwarded everything to Tom. Good, he said. This is the kind of paper trail we need. By the time Monday came, she still hadn't called me. Not to check in. Not to ask how the spa was. Not to say she missed me. I walked into the condo at 9 a.m., just as Carol was herding her son out the door. Oh, she said, startled. You're back early. Missed the place, I replied. And the little guy. She blinked, then smiled too widely. Everything okay? She asked, stepping into her shoes. Everything's great, I said. Thanks for watering the plants. That evening I went through the bathroom and collected the towels I had bought, the bath mat, the shower curtain with a pattern I liked. I boxed them quietly and placed them by the door. Mark asked about it. Just sorting through some things, I said. He shrugged. The next day I went through my room. Removed the photos, the books, the old watch my husband gave me. Piece by piece. No announcement. No fuss. Carol noticed. But she didn't ask. By Friday, the only thing left was the quilt. She came into my room that night. Leaning on the doorframe, arms crossed. Are you planning to leave? She asked. I didn't look up. Just kept folding. Eventually. She shifted her weight. Her tone was careful. We've all had a lot going on, she said. Maybe we got overwhelmed. Maybe, I said. You know we appreciate everything you've done. I didn't answer. She stepped into the room. I mean, it's not like we expected. You didn't have to expect, I said calmly. You just took. Her jaw tightened. That's not fair. No, I said, meeting her eyes. It's not. She left the room without another word. That night I sent Tom one final message. I'm ready. The next day, a courier delivered the legal packet to the house. A formal notice. Carol was no longer authorized to manage, view, or access any of my accounts. A complaint was filed with the Financial Oversight Committee regarding misuse of power of attorney. The bank had already closed all linked access. The post office had restored my mailing independence. I left the envelope on the kitchen counter. I knew she'd see it before work. She didn't speak to me that day. That evening the calls started. First from her. Then from Mark. Then a string of texts. Why are you doing this? You're tearing the family apart. Don't punish us for one mistake. Then, what about your grandson? He loves you. Don't do this to him. I didn't reply. Eventually she called again. Picked up. Her voice was a mix of breathless and trembling. I did everything for you, she said. You were losing control and I helped. You helped yourself, I said quietly. There was a long silence. Then she said, You're destroying my life. I looked out the window. A squirrel was crossing the fence, cautious and quick. No, I said. I'm restoring mine. Hung up. No theatrics. No screaming. Just a click. The next day I scheduled the locksmith. That evening I boxed the rest of my things and moved them into storage. I left one final envelope on her dresser. A note, handwritten. I was never confused. I was just quiet. Now I'm both clear and quiet. That should worry you more. Then I left. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. Out of something firmer than hurt. Peace after I left. The silence between us was not mutual. Carol filled it, loudly, with attempts to regain control. First came the texts, small at first, clipped. Can we talk? I didn't mean to hurt you. You're blowing this out of proportion. I ignored them. I had moved into a small rental. Quiet, one bedroom, furnished, with a view of the park. The air smelled like trees and pavement. It was enough. I bought a kettle, 2 plates, a stack of clean towels. Everything else stayed in storage until I knew what I wanted to bring forward with me. 3 days after the move, she called. You need to stop this, she said. I've got bills piling up because of you. I thought you cared about this family. I do, I said. That's why I left. What is that supposed to mean? It means I cared too much to keep pretending we were okay. Another silence. Then her voice sharpened. You're acting like a victim. You weren't helpless. You let me do all that. You said yes. I trusted you, I said. That's not the same thing. No, I agreed. It's not. The call ended there. Not slammed, just dropped. Matey. Later that week Mark called. I didn't pick up. He left a voicemail. Look, Olivia. I don't know what's going on between you and Carol, but you're scaring her. She's talking like you've gone off the deep end. She said you're talking to lawyers. Are you? Is that really necessary? He paused. You're hurting everyone. Especially your grandson. He misses you. Think about that. I deleted the message. Then came the guilt packages, carefully curated deliveries, a basket of herbal teas I used to like, a cashmere shawl I had once admired in a catalog, a framed photo of Carol and her son. No note. Just items, as if love could be shipped in boxes. I donated them all. Then, when that didn't work, the narrative changed. She sent a message to my sister in Maine. Claimed I was having memory problems. That I had grown paranoid. That she was worried about my stability. My sister called, hesitant. I told her the truth. I read her the numbers. She wept. Then Carol's message to me changed too. If you go public with this, it'll be ugly. Do you want that? For your grandson to grow up knowing his grandmother dragged his mother through the mud? I didn't respond. Because this wasn't public. It was personal. Another message came. A photo of my grandson asleep, clutching a toy I gave him. Underneath. He asks about you every night. Still I didn't respond. Because love is not a hostage note. I went for walks. Fed ducks. I read old books again. I wrote lists, what I owned, what I wanted to sell, what I would never loan again. I spoke with Tom. He said Carol's attempts to smear me could backfire legally if I pushed. He advised caution. I gave him my answer. I'm not trying to punish her. I'm trying to disappear from the part of her life where I was only useful. We filed a cease and desist letter regarding financial misrepresentation. We sent it certified. Carol signed for it herself. After that, she didn't call for 5 days. Then came one last voice message. I know you think you're doing this for yourself, but you're not. You're lonely. You're old. You've been manipulated by that lawyer friend. You'll realize that when you're sitting in that tiny apartment all alone, no one left to help you. And by then, it'll be too late. I listened to it once. Then saved it. Because it said everything better than I ever could. That same afternoon, I stood at my window, watching the wind move through the trees, and I whispered aloud. I'm not alone. I'm just not being used anymore. That night I turned off my phone. And I slept without interruption. It rained the morning the bank officially removed Carol from my accounts. Not a storm. Just a steady gray drizzle that softened the edges of everything. I sat by the window with my tea, watching the sidewalk glisten and blur. The email confirming her removal came at 9:17 a.m. I didn't smile. Not because I wasn't relieved. But it was the kind of relief that sits deep in the body, somewhere between the lungs and the spine. Quiet. Private. Later that afternoon, I changed the locks on the house. Not the condo. The house. Because while she had built a life imagining me out of it, I had been undoing her plans in silence. The title to the house had never been fully transferred. She had asked me to sign the paperwork months ago. Just for ease, she said, but I had hesitated. Something in me had paused, some faint warning. I had signed the intention, not the deed. And she, too confident, too distracted, had never followed through. Tom confirmed it. So the house remained mine. She hadn't even noticed. While she was busy calling it hers, planning renovations, choosing paint samples, I was quietly moving my documents back to paper. Reclaiming my passwords. Redrawing the lines. I spent a week cleaning it out. Every drawer. Every cabinet. I packed up her wine glasses, her blenders, her juicers. Left them in labeled boxes on the porch. I didn't tell her. I just hired movers to take the rest to a storage facility I rented under her name. I sent her the address. One line. Your items are here. Please retrieve them within 30 days. She texted back. Are you serious? I didn't answer. I was no longer accepting applications from my patients. She came once. I watched from behind the curtains as she opened the storage door, looked at the boxes and then at her phone. She didn't call. Just stood there, rain dotting her shoulders, a plastic folder clutched under one arm. She didn't knock. And I didn't wave. After she left, I changed the locks again. People say you don't get closure from silence, but I disagree. Silence isn't the absence of something. It's what fills the space after truth has been told and no further lies are permitted. I began settling into the house again, relearning its stillness. I moved my books back into the den, put up the old curtains, hung the wind chimes that had been in a box for too long. It wasn't the same as before. Never would be. But that was the point. The old life was gone. This one was quieter, simpler. But it belonged to me. I grew herbs in the kitchen again. Basil, thyme, mint. I painted the bedroom a soft yellow and changed the sheets to linen. On Sundays, I sat on the porch with a crossword and watched the street like I used to with my husband. He would have liked this version of things. Me whole again. One day, I received a letter from Carol's lawyer. Formal, measured, containing vague insinuations of misunderstandings, and a request for reconciliation through discussion. I didn't reply, because I had already reconciled what mattered. My worth was not negotiable. Mark sent a holiday card in December. A photo of their son at the zoo. No note, no return address. I placed it in the drawer with the warranty manuals and old takeout menus. Not out of spite, but because it didn't belong on the fridge. Not anymore. I saw Carol once at the market. We stood at opposite ends of the produce aisle. Her cart held almond milk and pre-cut fruit. Mine had eggs and 2 apples. We looked at each other, not speaking. She turned first, walked away, and I let her go. I got home and made apple crisp. The house smelled like it used to in fall, warm with hints of cinnamon and something like memory. That night, I opened the windows and let the air move freely through the rooms. The wind lifted the curtains. The chimes sang faintly. I stood in the center of the living room and looked around. The quiet didn't scare me anymore, because it wasn't hollow. It was mine. No one would rewrite me out of this place again. Not with paperwork. Not with guilt. Not with carefully worded concern disguised as care. I was not a mistake in their story. They were a footnote in mine. And now the page had turned. Brewed tea. Sat by the window. Watched the light fade. The final line came to me, not as a thought, but as a certainty, like the last note of a song you've always known by heart. You told me to disappear. So I did, just not the way you expected. The house is mine. The silence, too. And for once it feels like peace.